The silence stretched across the void like a blanket of death. Admiral Crick stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last traces of enemy fire fade from his tactical displays. The massive Alterian vessel hummed with the quiet efficiency of victory, its crystalline hull reflecting the distant stars like frozen tears. Around him, his crew moved with the careful precision of soldiers who have forgotten what peace felt like. "Sir, all enemy signatures have gone dark," reported his communications officer, her voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries of war. "The void-born stronghold shows no activity. No energy readings, no movement, nothing." Crix nodded slowly, his forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional Alterian posture of contemplation. His people had fought the mechanical horrors for longer than most species had existed. The Voidborn had swept the galaxy like a plague of metal and malice, consuming worlds and converting entire populations into their twisted army of machines. But now, finally it was over. The communication array crackled to life, filling the bridge with voices from across the galaxy. General Vex of the Crystalline Empire spoke first, his words sharp and precise like shattered glass. "Alterian fleet, this is General Vex. My scanners confirm the same readings. The enemy has ceased all operations." More voices joined the growing chorus of victory. Commander Thale of the Aquatic Collective reported from the water worlds of the Outer Rim. Captain Nori of the Insectoid Hives buzzed with mechanical efficiency from her position near the galactic core. Ship after ship, fleet after fleet, all reporting the same impossible truth. The Voidborn were gone. Crix felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope. He turned to his tactical officer, a young Alterian whose scales still held the bright blue of youth. "Run a full-spectrum analysis of the enemy's stronghold. I want to know if even a single circuit remains active." The minutes crawled by like hours as the scanners did their work. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery and the distant whisper of recycled air. Every eye was fixed on the displays, watching as the sensors probed the massive structure that had been the heart of Voidborn operations in this sector. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the structure is completely inert. No power signatures, no data transmissions, no life signs of any kind. It appears to be nothing more than dead metal." A cheer rose from somewhere in the back of the bridge, quickly spreading throughout the ship. 200 years of war, 200 years of loss and sacrifice, and finally it was over. Crix allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine expression of joy he had worn since his youth. The communication array buzzed again, this time with General Vex requesting a fleet-wide conference. Within minutes, the main display showed the faces of commanders from across the galaxy. The crystalline general's features were sharp and angular, carved from living stone that sparkled with inner light. Commander Thale's aquatic form rippled behind a containment field filled with her homeworld's sacred waters. Captain Nori's compound eyes reflected the light of a dozen stars, while her mandibles clicked in the rhythm of her species' battle songs. "Fellow commanders," General Vex began, his voice carrying across space to reach every ship in the combined fleet. "We have achieved what our ancestors thought impossible. The Voidborn threat has been eliminated." The word seemed strange, almost foreign after so long. Peace was a concept that belonged to history books and children's stories. War had been the only constant, the only certainty in a galaxy that had forgotten what tranquility meant. "Our losses have been beyond counting," Commander Thale added, her voice rippling like water over stones. "Entire worlds reduced to ash, billions of lives lost, civilizations erased from existence. But their sacrifice has not been in vain." Crix nodded solemnly. His own people had lost 3 homeworlds to machines. The Crystalline Empire had seen half their territory converted into Voidborn manufacturing centers. The Aquatic Collective had watched as their ocean worlds were drained and poisoned. Every species in the galaxy bore scars that would never fully heal. "What are our orders now?" asked Captain Nori, her translated voice carrying the musical quality of her species' natural communication. "Do we maintain position or begin withdrawal?" General Vex was quiet for a moment, consulting with advisors who remained off-screen. When he spoke again, there was something new in his voice: uncertainty. "All fleets will maintain defensive positions for the next 72 hours. We need to be absolutely certain that this is not some form of tactical deception. The conference dissolved into smaller discussions as commanders coordinated their remaining forces. Crix found himself staring at the tactical display, watching the red dots that had represented enemy positions slowly fade to gray. It seemed too easy, too clean for an enemy that had proven endlessly resourceful and adaptive. His contemplation was interrupted by a priority message from the Fleet Science Division. Dr. Yala, the chief xenobiologist, appeared on his personal screen with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Admiral, we're receiving authorization to begin preliminary examination of void-borne technology," she said, her words coming fast with scientific enthusiasm. This could be the greatest opportunity for advancement in galactic history. Crix considered the request carefully. The void-borne had possessed technology that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen. Their ships moved through space without conventional drives. Their weapons could adapt to any defense, and their manufacturing capabilities were beyond imagination. If that knowledge could be safely studied and understood, it might prevent such a war from ever happening again. "Approved," he said finally, "but maintain maximum safety protocols. Take no chances with any technology that shows even the slightest sign of activity." As Dr. Yala's image faded from the screen, Crix returned his attention to the bridge. His crew was beginning to relax, their movements becoming less rigid, their voices carrying notes of laughter he had not heard in years. Some were already talking about home, about families they had not seen since the war began, about lives they could finally rebuild. But something nagged at the Admiral's mind, a small voice of caution that refused to be silenced. The Void-born had been cunning beyond measure, patient in ways that organic minds could barely comprehend. They had waited centuries to reveal their true strength, had let the galaxy believe it was winning right up until the moment they unleashed their full fury. Could it be that simple? Could an enemy that had adapted to every strategy, overcome every defense, and survived every attack really be defeated by conventional warfare? The Void-born had shown an almost supernatural ability to learn and evolve. They had turned the galaxy's own weapons against it, had corrupted entire fleets, and turned them into extensions of their collective will. Crix walked to the observation deck, a transparent dome that offered an unobstructed view of space. In the distance, he could see the dark shape of the Void-born stronghold, a twisted mass of metal and machinery that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. It looked dead, lifeless as any derelict ship, but appearances could be deceiving. The communication array chimed again, this time with a message from the Galactic Council itself. The elderly voices of the Council elders carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. To all fleet commanders, the message began. Preliminary analysis confirms the cessation of all void-borne activity across 17 sectors. The enemy appears to have suffered catastrophic system failure, possibly triggered by the loss of their central coordination network. The message continued with technical details and strategic assessments, but Crix found his attention wandering. Through the observation dome, he could see other ships in the fleet, their lights blinking in patterns that spoke of life and hope. His own people were already making plans for the future, talking about reconstruction and renewal. Perhaps he was being too cautious. Perhaps 2 centuries of war had made him unable to recognize peace when it finally arrived. The enemy was gone, their technology silent, their threat eliminated. The galaxy could finally heal. As if responding to his thoughts, the communication array detected a new signal, faint and distant, coming from the edge of the system. The automatic systems classified it as unidentified, lacking the recognition codes of any known fleet or species. "Sir," called a communications officer, "we're receiving an unknown transmission. It's not matching any galactic standard protocols." Crix felt a chill run through his bones. "Source: unknown, sir. The signal appears to be moving toward our position from the outer system. Speed suggests a small vessel, possibly a scout or exploration ship." The Admiral stared at the tactical display as a new contact appeared, marked with the neutral yellow of an unidentified vessel. In all his years of war, every unknown contact had meant danger. But the war was over now. The galaxy was at peace. "Monitor the contact," he ordered. "Prepare a standard first contact protocol, but maintain defensive readiness." As his crew carried out his orders, Cricks remained at the observation dome, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, something new was approaching, something that had not been part of the Great War, had not shared in the victory or the loss. The silence of space stretched on, pregnant with possibilities that no one could yet imagine. Captain Blake stood in the center of the Pioneer's Bridge, studying the readings that scrolled across the main display. The human vessel had been traveling for 3 months since intercepting the strange alien broadcasts, following a trail of electromagnetic signatures that suggested a massive conflict had recently ended in this region of space. "Captain, we're approaching what looks like a battlefield," reported Lieutenant Mills, the ship's navigation officer. Her voice carried the excitement of someone seeing alien technology for the first time. The debris field extends for several light minutes in all directions. Blake nodded, his weathered face showing the calm expression of a career explorer. The Pioneer was Earth's most advanced deep space vessel, sent to investigate radio signals that had reached the solar system months ago. The transmissions had been unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, speaking of wars and victories, of species and technologies that existed only in science fiction. "Reduce speed to minimum thrust," Blake ordered. "I want full sensor sweeps of everything we encounter. This could be the most important discovery in human history." Drive West, the mission's chief scientist, looked up from his console with wide eyes. "Captain, the scale of this is incredible. I'm reading wreckage from hundreds of different ship designs, some of them the size of small cities. Whatever happened here was massive." Through the main view screen, the crew could see twisted metal drifting in the void, pieces of technology that defied easy understanding. Some fragments glowed with their own light. Others seemed to absorb the surrounding starlight like hungry shadows. The debris told a story of violence on a scale that humanity had never imagined. "Sir, I'm detecting active signals," announced Ensign Parker from the communication station. "Multiple sources, very weak, but definitely artificial. Some of them match the patterns we intercepted back home." Blake felt his pulse quicken. First contact with alien intelligence had been humanity's dream for centuries, and now it seemed within reach. "Can you establish communication?" "Working on it, sir. The signal protocols are completely foreign, but our computers are starting to recognize some patterns." As the Pioneer moved deeper into the debris field, the crew began to understand the scope of what they were seeing. This had not been a simple battle between two fleets, but a war that had consumed entire star systems. Broken worlds drifted past their view screen, their surfaces scarred by weapons that had turned continents into glass. "My God," whispered Drive West, his voice filled with awe and horror. "Look at those energy readings. Some of these weapons must have been powerful enough to crack planets." Blake studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of the destruction. Two distinct types of wreckage dominated the field: organic-looking ships with flowing curves and natural lines, and angular mechanical constructs that seemed built for pure efficiency. The organic ships appeared to be winners in this conflict, as their wreckage was less complete and showed signs of successful retreat. "Captain, I'm receiving a distress signal," Parker announced suddenly. "It's weak, but getting stronger. Someone's alive out there." "Put on speakers." The bridge filled with alien sounds, musical tones that rose and fell in patterns that suggested language. The computer's translation system worked frantically to decode the meaning, finally producing words that appeared on the display. "Help, injured, ship damaged, oxygen running low." Blake made his decision instantly. "Plot a course to that signal. Maximum safe speed." The Pioneer changed direction, weaving through the debris field toward the source of the transmission. As they drew closer, the alien vessel became visible on their screens. A beautiful ship that looked like it had been grown rather than built, its hull covered in what appeared to be scales that shifted color in the starlight. "It's magnificent," breathed Drive West. "The engineering principles are completely different from anything we use, but you can see the logic in the design." "Sir, the vessel appears to be venting atmosphere," reported Mills. "Life support is failing." Blake activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, prepare for emergency rescue operation. Dr. Martinez to the medical bay, engineering teams to shuttle bay 2. We're about to make first contact." The next hour passed in controlled chaos as the human crew worked to save their unknown beneficiaries. The Pioneer shuttles carefully docked with the alien vessel, using universal airlock adapters that had been theoretical until this moment. When the hatches finally opened, humanity came face to face with its first alien intelligence. The beings were tall and graceful, with 4 arms and skin that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their eyes were large and multifaceted, reflecting light in patterns that suggested deep intelligence. 3 of them were badly injured, their crystalline skin cracked and leaking a fluid that glowed with soft blue light. Dr. Martinez, the ship's medical officer, worked with careful precision to treat wounds he had never seen before. The aliens watched with expressions that somehow conveyed both gratitude and amazement, as if they were surprised by his gentle care. "Captain," one of the aliens spoke through a translation device they carried. "You are not of any species we know. Where you called?" "We are humans from the planet Earth," Blake replied, choosing his words carefully. "We detected signals from this region and came to investigate. We mean no harm." The alien who had spoken introduced himself as Scout Leader Trix of the Alterian Republic. Through halting conversation, the humans learned about the Great War that had just ended, about the mechanical enemy called the Voidborn that had threatened all organic life in the galaxy. "For 200 years we fought," Trix explained, his translated voice, carrying deep weariness. "Entire civilizations were consumed, worlds turned to metal and wire. But finally, the enemy has fallen silent." Drive West listened with fascination as Trix described technologies that humanity could barely comprehend. Faster-than-light travel that folded space itself, weapons that could destroy stars, manufacturing systems that could build fleets in days rather than years. "Your species is very young," Trix observed, studying the humans with curious eyes. "Your technology is primitive by galactic standards, yet you show kindness to strangers. This is unusual." Blake felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Humanity's most advanced starship was barely capable of interplanetary travel compared to what these beings possessed, yet they had still chosen to help when they found someone in need. "We believe in helping others when we can," Blake said simply. "It's part of what makes us human." As the Pioneer's medical team worked to stabilize the injured Alterians, Trix shared more details about the galactic situation. The war had ended so recently that most fleets were still maintaining battle positions, uncertain whether the victory was real or another void-born deception. "Your timing is fortunate," Trix said. "Admiral Crix's fleet is stationed not far from here. He will want to meet you and report your existence to the Galactic Council." The idea of a galactic government made Blake's head spin. Humanity had barely managed to unite their own planet, and now they were being introduced to a civilization that spanned star systems. "We would be honored to meet your admiral," Blake replied diplomatically. "But we should warn you that we represent only one ship. Our people don't yet have the technology for large-scale space travel." Trix made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "Captain Blake, in a galaxy that's just survived 2 centuries of war, even one ship of peaceful explorers is a precious gift." As the rescued Alterians recovered, they shared more about their technology and culture. Drive West took detailed notes on everything from their faster-than-light communication systems to their medical techniques. The differences were staggering, but so were the similarities. Like humans, the Alterians valued life and sought knowledge. They created art and music, formed families and friendships. "Your species shows great promise," Trix told Blake as they prepared to travel to Admiral Crix's fleet. "Young civilizations often bring fresh perspectives that older ones have forgotten." Blake nodded, though he wondered what perspective humanity could offer to beings who had mastered technologies beyond Earth's wildest dreams. Still, the Alterians had welcomed them with curiosity rather than hostility, treating them as equals despite the vast difference in their capabilities. The Pioneer followed Trix's repaired ship toward the main Alterian fleet, humanity's first delegation to a galactic community they had never known existed. As they traveled, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything for both species. In the depths of space, far from the celebrating fleets and the floating debris, something stirred in the darkness. Ancient sensors, thought destroyed, began to pulse with faint energy. The Voidborn had indeed fallen silent. But silence was not the same as death, and now these sensors detected something new, something that did not match any known pattern in their vast databases. The signatures were strange, chaotic in a way that defied analysis. The energy patterns were primitive, yet somehow unpredictable, following no logical progression that the mechanical minds could understand. For the first time in their existence, the Voidborn encountered data that refused to fit into their perfect calculations. Deep and hidden bases scattered across dead worlds, backup systems began to activate. The war was indeed over, but perhaps it was time for a new kind of conflict, one that would test not just military might, but the very nature of intelligence itself. The galaxy had celebrated too soon. The space around Admiral Crix's flagship suddenly exploded with violent energy as tears and reality itself began to open. The Alterian crew scrambled to their stations, alarms screaming across the bridge as sensors detected the impossible. Massive ships emerging from dimensional rifts that should not exist. Battle stations. Crix shouted, his forearms moving with practiced efficiency across his command console. All ships. Defensive formation Delta 7. The Voidborn emerged like nightmares made manifest, their hulls black as a void between stars, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. These were not the same machines the galaxy had fought for 2 centuries. These vessels were larger, more complex, their designs incorporating technologies that the Voidborn had apparently developed in secret. Captain Blake watched from the Pioneer's bridge in fascination and horror as the alien fleet around them transformed from a peaceful gathering into a desperate war formation. The human ship was tiny compared to massive Alterian vessels, barely the size of their shuttle bays, but Blake had positioned his ship near Admiral Crix's flagship when the attack began. "Sir, those ships are definitely mechanical," reported Drive West, his voice tight with concentration as he studied the readings. "But the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They're using some kind of dimensional folding technology to appear directly in normal space." Lieutenant Mills looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Captain, Admiral Crix is requesting our immediate withdrawal. He says these are the Voidborn and that we should flee while we still can." Blake studied the tactical display, watching as more enemy ships continued to pour through the rifts. The Alterian fleet, which had seemed so massive and powerful when the Pioneer first encountered it, suddenly looked small and outnumbered. "Negative," Blake said firmly. "Signal Admiral Crix that we're staying to assist. Sir, with respect, what could we possibly do against those things?" Mills asked, gesturing at the screen where Voidborn vessels the size of mountains were taking formation. "I don't know yet," Blake admitted, "but we're not running away from the first alien species that showed us kindness." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature sun. The Alterian ships launched weapons that tore through the fabric of space itself, while the Voidborn responded with beams of energy that seemed to devour light. The human crew watched in awe as technologies beyond their understanding clashed in the void. "Captain, I'm detecting something strange," Drive West announced, his instruments focused on the nearest Voidborn vessel. "Their hull configuration is changing. It's like they're adapting to the Alterian weapons in real time." Blake leaned forward, studying the display. Sure enough, the mechanical ship's surface was shifting, its armor plating rearranging itself into new patterns. Within minutes, the Alterian energy beams that had initially damaged the vessel were bouncing harmlessly off its modified hull. "They're learning," Blake realized with growing alarm. "Each time they get hit, they're adapting to resist that type of attack." Across the communication channels, alien voices filled with panic and confusion. The Alterian commanders were discovering what Blake had just observed. Their enemy was not just alive, but evolving during the battle itself. Admiral Crix's voice cut through the chaos, speaking directly to the Pioneer. "Captain Blake, these entities learn from every engagement. Our weapons become useless within minutes of first contact. You must leave now before they adapt to your presence as well." "Admiral, maybe that's exactly why we should stay," Blake replied, an idea forming in his mind. "They adapt to known patterns, right? What happens when they encounter something completely unpredictable?" Before Crix could respond, a Voidborn vessel targeted the Pioneer with a scanning beam. The human ship's primitive shield sparked and overloaded, but held long enough for Blake to order evasive maneuvers. "All hands, brace for combat," Blake announced over the intercom. "We're about to find out what happens when chaos meets order." The Pioneer dug toward the nearest void-born ship, its small size allowing it to weave between the massive vessels like a fighter among bombers. The enemy's targeting systems, designed to track and predict the movements of logical military formations, struggled to follow the human ship's erratic flight path. "Sir, they're having trouble locking onto us," reported Ensign Parker. "Their weapons keep firing where we were instead of where we are." Blake grinned fiercely. "That's because they're trying to predict our next move based on military doctrine. But we're not following any doctrine." The Pioneer performed a maneuver that would have made any military academy instructor faint. A full barrel roll directly into the path of an enemy energy beam, using the ship's rotation to deflect the blast along its hull rather than absorbing it directly. The move was insane, dangerous, and completely effective. "How did you know that would work?" Drive, West asked, gripping his console as the ship spun through space. "I didn't," Blake admitted. "That's the point. The void-born vessel's adaptive systems went into overdrive, tried to understand and counter the human ship's movements. But every time they calculated a solution, the Pioneer did something different, something that violated the logical progression of space combat." Admiral Crix watched in amazement as the tiny human vessel danced between enemy ships, somehow avoiding destruction through pure unpredictability. More importantly, he noticed that the void-born ships pursuing the Pioneer were becoming sluggish, their response times increasing as their computational systems struggled to process the chaotic data. "All ships, observe the human vessel's tactics," Crix broadcast to his fleet. "They're disrupting the enemy's adaptive algorithms through random behavior patterns." The Altrian commanders began to understand. For 2 centuries, they had fought the Void-born with logical, predictable military strategies. Their formations followed established patterns. Their tactics adhered to proven doctrine. Their movements could be calculated and countered. But humanity had no such restrictions. "Captain Blake, can you teach us your methods?" Admiral Crix asked over the communication link. "I'm not sure there's anything to teach," Blake replied, dodging another energy blast through a maneuver that seemed to defy physics. "We're just making it up as we go along." Drive West, studying the enemy's behavior patterns, made a crucial discovery. "Captain, the Void-born aren't just adapting to individual attacks. They're trying to create a predictive model of all organic behavior. But human actions don't fit their algorithms." "What do you mean?" Blake asked, pulling the ship through another impossible turn. "They've been studying galactic species for centuries, learning how organic minds think and react. But humans think differently. We're more random, more willing to take risks that other species would consider logical." The battle around them was shifting as Altrian commanders began to experiment with more chaotic tactics. Ships broke formation without warning. Weapons fired in seemingly random patterns. And entire squadrons performed maneuvers that had no basis in military theory. The effect on the Void-born was immediate and dramatic. Their perfect coordination began to break down as their collective intelligence struggled to process the flood of unpredictable data. Ships that had been adapting to Altrian weapons suddenly became vulnerable again as their adaptive systems became overloaded. "It's working," Admiral Crix announced with amazement in his voice. "The enemy's response time is increasing. Their adaptation rate is slowing." Blake felt a surge of hope, but also growing concern. The Pioneer was taking damage from near misses, and their small size wouldn't protect them forever. More importantly, he could see Void-born reinforcements still pouring to the dimensional rifts. "Admiral, we need to coordinate this chaos," Blake said, ducking as sparks flew from an overloaded console. "If we can get all your ships to act unpredictably at the same time, we might be able to overload their entire network." "Coordinate chaos?" Crix sounded confused. "How does one organize randomness?" Blake thought quickly, drawing on his experience as an explorer rather than a warrior. "Think of it like a jazz performance. Every musician plays their own part, but they all listen to each other and respond to music as it develops. No sheet music, no predetermined patterns, just controlled creativity." The concept was alien to the Altrian military mind, but desperation made them willing to try anything. Admiral Crix broadcast Blake's instructions to the entire fleet. Abandon all tactical doctrine. Trust your instincts. Make decisions based on feeling rather than logic. The result was beautiful and terrifying. The Altrian fleet transformed from a rigid military formation into something organic and alive, each ship moving with its own rhythm while staying connected to the greater pattern. The Void-born masters of adaptation and prediction found themselves facing an enemy that refused to be understood. As the mechanical ship systems overloaded from trying to process the chaos, their perfect black hulls began to show cracks of light. For the first time in the war, the Void-born were losing not because they were outgunned, but because they were outthought by minds that refused to think logically. But in the depths of space, ancient and patient intelligences were watching this battle with interest. The Void-born had been surprised, but they were not defeated, and they were learning from this encounter, studying these strange new patterns, preparing to adapt once again. The real war was just beginning. Dr. Kane wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the data streaming across his console in the Pioneer's makeshift laboratory. 3 days had passed since the first chaotic battle, and more human ships had arrived from Earth after receiving Blake's emergency transmission. The small human fleet now consisted of 7 vessels, each one bringing different approaches to the impossible war they had stumbled into. "Captain, I think I understand why our tactics work so well against them," Kane announced, his voice filled with excitement and exhaustion. The Void-born operate on pure logic and pattern recognition. They've spent centuries cataloging every possible military strategy, every weapon configuration, every tactical formation used by galactic species. Blake looked up from the tactical display, where he was planning the next engagement. Around them, the combined human and Altrian fleet prepared for another confrontation with Void-born forces that had been growing stronger and more numerous each day. "But humans are different," Kane continued, pulling up holographic displays that show brain activity patterns. "Our neural networks don't follow the same logical pathways as other species. We make decisions based on intuition, emotion, random inspiration, things that can't be calculated or predicted." Lieutenant Ford, who had become the unofficial leader of human combat tactics, laughed grimly from his position at the weapons console. "So you're saying we're winning because we're crazy?" "Essentially, yes," Kane replied with a tired smile. "Every other species in the galaxy follows some form of logical decision-making process. Even when they try to be unpredictable, they're still operating within parameters that can be understood and modeled. But humans genuinely don't make sense." The communication array crackled with an incoming message from Admiral Crix, whose fleet had been working alongside the humans to develop new fighting techniques. "Captain Blake, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human tactics are being adopted by multiple species, with varying degrees of success." Blake accepted the transmission, watching as Crix's crystalline features appeared on the main screen. The Altrian admiral looked tired but hopeful, a combination that Blake was beginning to recognize in all their alien allies. "What kind of success rates are we seeing?" Blake asked. "The Crystalline Empire reports moderate effectiveness when their commanders attempt to randomize their formations," Crix replied. "However, the aquatic collective struggles with the concept of abandoning logic entirely. Their culture is built around fluid precision and calculated movement." Dr. Kane nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Different species have different cognitive structures. What works for humans might not work for beings who evolved with completely different thought patterns." "But, sir," interrupted Ensign Parker from Communications, "I'm detecting something new in the Void-born transmissions. Their adaptation protocols are changing." The bridge fell silent as everyone focused on Parker's readings. The young officer's face was pale as she studied the alien signals. "They're not just trying to predict our movements anymore," she continued. "They're attempting to analyze the structure of human thought itself. It's like they're trying to reverse engineer our brains." Blake felt a chill run down his spine. How long before they succeed? Kane pulled up his analysis on the main display, showing complex mathematical models that hurt to look at directly. "Based on the rate of their adaptation, I'd estimate they'll have a working model of human unpredictability within 72 hours. Once they can predict our randomness, our advantage disappears." Then we need to evolve faster than they can adapt, Ford declared, his hands already moving over his console. Every time they think they understand us, we need to become something different. Blake studied the tactical situation, watching as void-born ships maneuvered in patterns that were becoming increasingly familiar. The enemy was learning, cataloging every human action and reaction, building a database of human behavior that would eventually make their chaos predictable. All human vessels, this is Blake, he announced over the fleet communication channel. We're implementing protocol insanity. Every ship will operate completely independently. No coordination, no shared tactics, no communication during combat. Each captain will fight their own battle, using whatever methods feel right in the moment. The response from his fellow captains was immediate and worried. Captain Rice of the science vessel Darwin was the first to object. Blake, that's not tactics, that's suicide. Without coordination, we'll be destroyed piecemeal. Maybe, Blake admitted, but if we coordinate, we create patterns. If we create patterns, they can predict us. If they can predict us, we're already dead. Captain Torres of the cargo hull of Magellan, which had been converted into an improvised warship, spoke up next. What about the alien fleets? How do they fit into this madness? Blake looked at Admiral Crix's image on his screen. The Altrian commander nodded slowly, understanding the desperate logic behind the human strategy. The galactic fleets will continue to work together using modified chaos tactics, Crix announced. But the human vessels will operate as pure wildcards. Your unpredictability will create openings that our forces can exploit. The next battle began 6 hours later, when void-born reinforcements emerged from dimensional rifts near a damaged space station. The human ships scattered immediately, each one approaching the enemy from a different angle with no apparent coordination or plan. Captain Rice dove the Darwin directly at the largest void-born vessel, using his ship's scientific equipment as improvised weapons. Sensor arrays became electromagnetic pulse generators. Sample collection probes turned into kinetic projectiles, and the ship's laboratory produced chemical reactions that created spectacular but seemingly random explosions. Captain Torres took the opposite approach, using the Magellan's massive cargo bays to ram smaller enemy ships while jettisoning containers filled with everything from spare parts to food supplies. The containers exploded on impact, creating debris fields that confused void-born sensors and disrupted their formation flying. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ford had convinced Blake to let him try something that violated every rule of space combat. The Pioneer flew directly into the enemy's weapon fire, using the ship's hull as a conductor to redirect energy beams toward other void-born vessels. The technique was suicidal and brilliant, turning the enemy's own weapons against them in ways that their algorithms couldn't process. "This is insane," Dr. Kane muttered as the ship shook from another redirected energy blast. "We're using our own hull as a weapon." "That's the point," Ford replied, grinning as he adjusted their course to intercept another beam. "They can't adapt to tactics that shouldn't work in the first place." The battle raged for hours, with human ships performing maneuvers that defied logic, physics, and sanity. Captain Lee of the mining vessel Armstrong used industrial drilling equipment to bore holes directly through enemy hulls. Captain Nakamura of the research ship Galileo created localized gravity wells that sent void-born ships crashing into each other. Each human captain fought their own unique battle, using whatever resources they had in ways that made no tactical sense. The void-born adaptation systems went into overdrive, trying to analyze and counter strategies that changed faster than they could be cataloged. "It's working," Admiral Crix reported as his Altrian forces exploited the confusion created by human chaos. "The enemy's response time is degrading rapidly. Their coordination is breaking down." But Kane was watching his instruments with growing concern. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the void-born command ships. They're not trying to adapt anymore." "What are they doing?" Blake asked, pulling the Pioneer through another impossible maneuver. "I think they're preparing to abandon adaptation entirely," Kane replied, his voice filled with dread. "If they can't predict us, they might decide to simply destroy everything in the area, including themselves." The realization hit Blake like a physical blow. The Void-born were so committed to their logical perfection that they would rather commit suicide than admit defeat to chaotic organic mines. Their command ships were building up energy for weapons that would destroy not just a human and Altrian fleets, but entire star systems. All ships, emergency withdrawal, Blake ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew they were too deep in the battle to escape the coming devastation. The Voidborn command ships began to glow with energy that made nearby stars look dim by comparison. In their perfect mechanical logic, they had calculated that total destruction was preferable to accepting the existence of minds they could not understand or control. But in the depths of space, other forces were stirring. Human reinforcements were arriving from Earth, bringing with them new levels of chaos and unpredictability. The war was about to enter a phase that neither side could predict it, where the very nature of intelligence itself will be tested in ways that would reshape the galaxy forever. Admiral Stone's fleet dropped out of hyperspace just as the Voidborn command ships reached critical energy levels. The newly arrived human vessels numbered in the hundreds, a massive armada that Earth had assembled in record time after receiving Captain Blake's desperate messages about the galactic war. All ships. This is Admiral Stone, the gruff voice announced across every communication channel. I'm seeing energy readings that suggest someone's about to blow up half the solar system. Would someone mind explaining what's happening here? Captain Blake, still dodging enemy fire in the Pioneer, felt a surge of relief at hearing another human voice. Admiral, the Voidborn are preparing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. We need immediate assistance. Stone studied the tactical display on his flagship, the massive Earth battleship Defiance, and whistled low. Well, that's what I call a hostile welcome to the neighborhood. All Earth ships, prepare for combat against unknown mechanical entities. Rules of engagement. There are no rules. The human reinforcement fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Earth had sent everything that could fly and fight. Military vessels, converted civilian ships, experimental prototypes, and craft that defied easy classification. The fleet included asteroid miners with industrial-grade drilling equipment, space tugs with oversized engines, luxury yachts fitted with improvised weapons, and research vessels carrying experimental technologies. Dr. Kane watched in amazement as the Earth fleet scattered across the battlefield with no apparent organization or plan. Captain, they're not following any formation pattern I recognize. That's because there isn't one, Blake replied, grinning despite the desperate situation. Stone believes in what he calls controlled anarchy. Every captain makes their own decisions based on what they see in front of them. The arrival of the human armada had an immediate effect on the Voidborn collective consciousness. Their adaptation algorithms, already strained by trying to process chaotic human tactics, suddenly faced hundreds of new variables. Each Earth ship brought different approaches, different technologies, and different levels of creative insanity. Captain Murphy of the mining ship Iron will use his vessels or processing equipment to literally eat chunks out of enemy hulls, digesting metal and ceramic armor, before spitting the waste products back as high-velocity projectiles. The technique was messy, inefficient, and completely impossible to predict or counter. Commander Wright of the luxury yacht Serenity had converted her ship's ballroom into a kinetic weapon launcher, using the ship's artificial gravity systems to accelerate dining furniture to relativistic speeds. Crystal chandeliers became devastating fragmentation bombs, while marble sculptures turned into armor-piercing rounds. The experimental vessel Prometheus, under Captain Hayes, deployed technologies that shouldn't have worked according to known physics. The ship's prototype drive system created localized space-time distortions that trapped Voidborn vessels in temporal loops, forcing them to repeat the same actions endlessly, while human forces attacked from angles that existed outside normal space. Sir, the enemy's adaptation rate has dropped to near zero, reported Dr. Kane, his instruments showing the strain on Voidborn processing systems. They're receiving too much contradictory data to form coherent response patterns. Admiral Stone's voice boomed across the communication channels as he observed the battle. All right, people, the metalheads are having a nervous breakdown. Time to push them over the edge. I want every ship to do the most ridiculous thing they can think of. The response was immediate and spectacular. The cargo hauler Big Betty began using its loading cranes to physically grab enemy fighters and throw them at larger ships. The research vessel Einstein created artificial black holes the size of basketballs, using them to play a deadly game of cosmic billiards with void-born formations. Captain Santos of the hospital ship Mercy took perhaps the most audacious approach of all. She flew directly into the middle of the enemy fleet and began broadcasting medical advice on all frequencies, offering to treat wounded void-born systems and providing therapy for traumatized artificial intelligences. The psychological warfare aspect was so unexpected that several enemy ships actually stopped firing, their systems overwhelmed by trying to process the concept of compassionate enemies. But it was Captain Blake who made the decisive move. Watching the Voidborn command ships building toward a catastrophic self-destruction sequence, he realized that their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. All ships, listen carefully, Blake announced. The Voidborn are about to destroy themselves because they can't accept the existence of minds they can't understand. But what if we give them something even more impossible to comprehend? What did you have in mind? Admiral Stone asked, his flagship using its massive bulk to ram through a line of enemy vessels. Blake took a deep breath and made the most irrational decision of his career. We're going to surrender. The stunned silence that followed his announcement lasted exactly 3 seconds before every human captain began talking at once. Blake, have you lost your mind? Captain Rice demanded. Surrender to machines that want to kill everything organic? Captain Torres added. Sir, with respect, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Lieutenant Ford said from his position at the weapons console. Blake raised his voice over the chaos. Listen to me. The Voidborn operate on pure logic. They've calculated that destroying everything is preferable to accepting defeat. But what happens when an enemy surrenders while simultaneously continuing to fight? The concept was so paradoxical that even the human captain struggled to understand it. But Admiral Stone, veteran of dozens of impossible battles, began to laugh. You magnificent lunatic, Stone said with admiration. You want to break their brains by creating a logical impossibility. Exactly, Blake confirmed. We surrender unconditionally while refusing to stop fighting. We offer to negotiate while ramming their ships. We request mercy while blowing up their command centers. The human fleet implemented Blake's impossible strategy with the enthusiasm of people who had long ago abandoned any pretense of sanity. Ships broadcast surrender messages while launching missiles. Captains offered peace treaties while using their vessels as battering rams, and crews sang lullabies while deploying experimental weapons that turned enemy hulls into abstract art. The effect on the Voidborn collective was immediate and catastrophic. Their logical processing systems, already strained beyond capacity, faced a contradiction so fundamental that it created cascade failures throughout their network. How could an enemy surrender while continuing to fight? How could beings offer peace while waging war? How could the same action be both submission and aggression? The Voidborn command ships, their energy buildup nearly complete, suddenly began to flicker as their systems struggled with the paradox. For the first time in their existence, the mechanical minds encountered a problem that had no logical solution, a question that could not be answered through calculation or analysis. It's working, Dr. Kane announced with wonder in his voice. Their entire network is destabilizing. The logical contradiction is propagating through their collective consciousness like a virus. One by one, the Voidborn vessel began to shut down as their artificial minds collapsed under the weight of an impossible paradox. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries found itself defeated not by superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by the simple human ability to be completely irrational. Admiral Crix, watching the battle from his Altrian flagship, spoke with awe in his translated voice. Captain Blake, your species has accomplished something that 2 centuries of warfare could not. You have given the galaxy peace through the power of absolute madness. As the last Voidborn command ship went dark, its systems unable to process the contradiction of fighting surrender, Blake felt a mixture of exhaustion and amazement. Humanity had stumbled into a galactic war and ended it not through superior technology or military might, but through their greatest weakness, their complete inability to make sense. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the human fleet continued to broadcast surrender messages while celebrating their victory. It was a moment that would be remembered for millennia, when chaos triumphed over order and madness defeated perfection. Admiral Stone's voice filled the communication channels one final time. Well, people, I think we've officially introduced ourselves to the galaxy. Any species that can defeat an enemy by surrendering while fighting probably deserves a seat at the big kids' table. In the depths of space, the dormant Voidborn network lay silent, its collective consciousness trapped in an endless loop of trying to solve an unsolvable problem. The war was truly over, ended not by the weapons of logic, but by the beautiful impossibility of the human mind. And across the galaxy, species that had fought for survival for centuries began to understand that their newest allies were both the most dangerous and most valuable addition to galactic civilization, beings who could think the unthinkable and make the impossible seem reasonable.